Did I or did I not say when I did my video on the source material that there were some decent ingredients to where if they adapted it well enough, I might be able to rate this somewhere around 3 stars, which is significantly higher than the other so-called romance stories I've seen this company release. My Letterboxd followers already know this, but for the rest of you, guess what I rated Marked Men? 3 stars.
We did it!
Hello romance girlies, I'm Lady Genevieve, and on my channel I talk about entertainment media. Who would have thought that the same company behind the After films could turn out a romance film that I would rate at 3 stars. Now, I don't know how all of your scales work, but for me, 3 stars and up usually means that the film has more good than bad. There's nothing too glaring or egregious to necessitate a significant point reduction. So how did we get here, you might ask? Well, let's rewind a bit. If you are new here, hello, I already have a video published on my channel in which I went over the source material of this new film, Marked Men, Rule and Shaw, and the book is called Rule. I went over a fair bit of the plot, I gave my feedback on things I would prefer to see changed as a viewer, or things that I recommended or assumed would be changed under my assumption that the film adaptation was aiming to have a certain amount of commercial appeal to a wider movie viewing audience, with plenty of those people being folks that have not and will not read the source material. Whether or not you choose to read the source material, I will recommend that you get a library card, support your local libraries, because if you get a local library card, it helps with their funding, and library cards are free. I was able to check out the source material via an online database that was connected to my local library. If you want to know more of my detailed thoughts on that source material, I will direct you to that video instead, because today I am doing a spoiler-free review of the film. I have now watched a press screener, and I also have some further information for inquiring minds that want to know.
I just can't get it off my mind. So keep.
When I posted my video about the source material, I had gotten some questions from the audience about whether or not I deemed it as worth it to go see it at the cinema, or whether or not they should simply wait to watch it on VOD. Let me address that question first, and then we will get into more of the review. I vastly prefer seeing films at the cinema. I don't actually review as many direct-to-streaming releases nowadays, because to me, seeing films at the cinema on the big screen is the superior viewing experience. If you have any sort of interest in the film, I would encourage you to go watch it on the big screen, because for me personally, watching things at home on my laptop simply does not hit the same way that it does watching it on the big screen. Not only that, Marked Men isn't going to be released on VOD until February 28th. That is over a month after the limited theatrical release. If you are okay with waiting until then to order it on VOD, then of course you're free to do that. If you're going to feel terribly inconvenienced by having to wait until then of course I'm going to recommend you get your ticket and go see it this week while it is available. But now let me share my quick spoiler-free review of Marked Men and how it is that I landed at 3 stars. This will be a largely spoiler-free review, although I will hint at some details to do with the source material, so if you've read the book, or at the very least you watched my video on the source material, that might paint a more vivid picture in your mind of what my opinions are. I will be posting a full spoiler review where we will talk about the plot in much greater detail the week of the VOD release happening next month. We will be able to go through more of the salacious specifics at that point in time.
Lord have mercy.
To give an introductory overview of the premise, in case you are not already familiar, Marked Men is about a tattoo artist named Rule and a family friend named Shaw. They've known each other for a few years. To quote the log line, after one uninhibited night, they're forced to confront buried feelings while navigating grief, family expectations, and fear of commitment, testing whether love between two people from such different worlds can truly survive. This film has a lower budget, and that often poses an issue for me personally, because I'm a maximalist. I love a grandiose visual spectacle, but if you don't have the budget, there's only so much you can do in that regard. So when it comes to romance, a lot of responsibility will fall onto the actors to make the romance believable and perform their characters and that relationship in such a way that you can get the audience invested in it. You're also going to preferably have a director that understands how to guide the actors in such a way that can enhance their delivery of romance and both capture and show showcase it effectively on camera. With most romance stories, you know that the main couple will get together in the end. That's the whole point. But is the audience rooting for these two to get together? And me personally, I was. Sorry, not sorry. They convinced me. Now keep in mind that this is a review without spoilers, so I'm going to need to be very vague in my descriptions and feedback. There were a couple of points in the film earlier on in the love story where all I had to do was observe the way that Rule would look at Shaw, and Chase Stokes convinced me with his acting. He told me everything I needed to know about how Rule feels about Shaw. I didn't need him to say it out loud, and it also wouldn't make sense for him to say as much at that point in the plot because of the larger story and also the type of character that Rule is, and at what point he's going to be able or willing to verbally express certain feelings that he has. And as for Shaw, she has some beautiful moments where actress Sydney Taylor is giving a really honest performance that works well on its own, but also in tandem with Chase's performance. Now, I wasn't there on set, so I'm not going to speak about these people as if I know how they worked together, but it came across on screen like they had a great rapport as scene partners, that they were both giving each other something to play off of, and they also both knew how to respond really well to what the other person was offering. Let me suppress the urge to make some sort of tennis reference right now, although if you watched my top movies of 2024 video, or even my queer review, you will know that I do enjoy challengers.
I'm taking such good care of my little white boys.
I do have a random technical gripe though. It really bothered me to the point that now I do have to mention it. If you've watched the film's trailer, you will be able to see the part where Shaw makes her first big move on Rule. In that scene, they randomly edited the non-diegetic soundtrack to be playing way too loud. It took me out of the moment when I should have been focusing on this pivotal moment of their relationship, and instead I had to take a moment to think, is it too late to fix the audio mix on this? Why are you playing the music so loudly? This is when I should first and foremost hear them talking to each other, have their breathing patterns changed because of what's happening between them. I should be able to hear them. Just be quiet and let me hear them instead of the soundtrack.
Stop talking, Henry. Stop. Stop talking.
Not to mention, that part of the trailer was a major standout moment for me, specifically because they stopped the loud, annoying yeehaw rock music that was playing before that moment.
Girls, would you tell I nurtured tight.
And they just focused in on this intimate moment between Rule and Shaw.
You tell me you don't feel the same way I do. I'll stop.
Even a maximalist like myself knows that sometimes small things like these can have a huge impact, and that's why I put that movie in my top 10 of 2024. I know, I see what I just did there. I couldn't resist throwing in an Easter egg reference for all of the Choki R laws in the audience. But all punchlines aside, this was a really strong moment in the trailer because it was a refreshing subversion from certain conventions we usually see from these character archetypes. Shaw being the inexperienced female lead who has been in unrequited love with the male lead for years, and Rule being the overly promiscuous, emotionally stunted male lead who has just figured out that he's also attracted to the female lead, and yet she's the one fully taking charge in this encounter. She's the one driving their relationship dynamic towards change, and he's the one that is completely overcome by the moves that she's throwing down. Now, maybe you can understand why I was leaning more towards a 3.6 out of 5 until I remembered that I prefer maximalism, comedy, and whimsy in my love stories. Chase Stokes, can you do comedy? Do you have a twinkle in your eye?
Bit of foreplay, twinkle in the eye. The deed, pregnancy.
Now, any of my regular viewers will know that I love a good rom-com. I want to see the whimsy and banter, and if you throw in a bit of slapstick or shenanigans, I will enjoy it even more. Spiders hunt in pairs. They hunt in pairs.
Spiders hunt pairs! They hunt pairs!
But this is not a romantic comedy. This is a romance drama. For this subgenre, I have a bias when it comes to the tone and storyline. If I'm watching a romantic drama, I tend to prefer when the conflict is coming from an external source as opposed to an intrinsic character flaw one or both of the characters has to work through in order to be able to make their love story work. This isn't a situation where I can say that something wasn't executed at a high enough technical level. This is just a particularly subjective preference of mine that is relevant to how I review Marked Men as well as other romantic works of fiction. In the case of Marked Men, Rule is a character that is dealing with a lot of trauma from a personal loss. He doesn't always have the healthiest coping mechanisms, nor does he know how to responsibly manage his emotions in highly stressful situations. As such, some of the things that he's going to do in the before portion of his character arc and character growth are things that I simply don't enjoy watching. It's not a situation where I can comfortably say that it's bad in quality. It's simply a particular type of storytelling that I don't have as much fun watching compared to your MGM Technicolor razzle-dazzle romantic comedies. So when I was watching Marked Men, when we were in the first portion of the film, where we get more of the fun stuff, we don't have a meet cute because the characters already know one another, but you know, that whisper of a thrill, of making moves towards one another, of finally revealing more of how you really feel, taking those first steps of romance and seduction. That part of the story, oh, I was having fun with that. At that point, I was leaning higher in my rating. I was more so in the realm of maybe I'll give this a 3.6. And then we got out of the first half of the runtime, and we have to dig into the trenches and mine the layers of what's really going on internally with Rule, and he has to make some mistakes and learn from them. And I find myself counting down the minutes until we can just get to the inevitable reconciliation. And that's not a spoiler, that's romance. You know the basic concept. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. That's an immovable fact. You know around what percentage into the runtime you're going to have some sort of large rift between your main couple, and eventually they will kiss and make up. Roll credits. Am I happy when they make up? Yes, absolutely, because that's what I'm here for. Now, as far as the adaptation process goes, there was a lot of heavier material in the book that I was hoping would be removed when transferring that source material onto the big screen. The severity of how awful both Rule's parents and Shaw's parents are to the pair of them. If you want me to talk about the horror genre, I'm more than happy to do that, but right now I'm here to see romance. Now, thankfully, the more egregious things Rule's parents and Shaw's parents say and do to them was largely removed, and for that I am grateful because it would have been downright miserable to have to sit through all of that. If you're watching the film without knowing the source material, of course you're not going to be someone that makes those comparisons, but I was, because I made my video on the source material first, and I agree with many of the choices they made about several of the heavier parts of the story being removed. Another example of that, the thing that happens to Shaw near the end of the book, if they had done all of that on screen and made a young actress play that material, I would have been very tempted to just turn the movie off. I don't want to watch that. Now, something does happen, but it is nowhere near the scale and scope of what happens to Shaw in the book. The part I want to talk about next is a B plot. In the book, Aiden has a sort of non-romantic subplot with a character called Jet. It really wasn't anything I deemed as being worth my time when I was making my video about the source material. Part of the reason for my skipping it was because in the book, the chapters alternate between being from Rule or Shaw's point of view. As such, you don't get to observe a lot of what happens with other characters unless they're directly interacting with one of the two main characters. When you do film adaptations of books that have those sort of locked point of views, it's a very natural shift to expand that perspective so that you can show any and every character you feel like focusing on. Set up the cameras and lights, you put the actors on their marks, and you go. I didn't have much in the way of expectations for Aiden and Jet because of how the source material plays out, so imagine my surprise when that was actually a thing. I'm fairly certain I wrote in my notes that they were very cute together and that I wanted to see more of them. The Aiden Jet situation is one where I have both compliments and criticism, because how are you going to dangle a cute couple in front of me in a romance film, and then you only give me crumbs? When all of the serious drama is going on in the A plot of Rule and Shaw's love story, why aren't we cutting back to Aiden and Jet being cute? Now, you might argue, well, that's undermining the drama of what's going on, but I would argue that a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. If Stephanie Zanoni could rip her heart out on stage because she thinks her cool writer is dead, and then in the midst of that heartbreak, we get Paulette Rebchuk Brooke standing up for herself to Johnny Nogarelli because he needed to be put in his place and humbled before he was ready to step up and be Paulette's man, then why couldn't we execute a similar concept as that in Marked Men, Rule and Shaw?
But this chick has been bullied by one Johnny Nogarelli for the last time.
Grease 2 is and will continue to be the blueprint. And not only that, how are you going to dangle a cute Blasian couple in front of me, the person who published an entire video essay uplifting Blasian solidarity in entertainment media 6 months ago, and not fully follow through on that? Give me more of them. Believe it or not, romance girlies can multitask. We can follow multiple romances at once.
Talented, brilliant, incredible, amazing, show-stopping.
But anyway, to summarize my main points, I would have scored this higher if there was more fun and whimsy, but again, that's a specific bias of me leaning away from slice-of-life romantic dramas. If there was more of a maximalist visual style, but then again, I never expected them to have that because it was always obvious to me that they were working on a smaller budget. And if we had had more of the Aiden and Jet subplot.
It's poetry!
On the positive side, I believed the chemistry of these two leads. They were both very convincing and emotionally truthful in how they built and performed their characters as individuals as well as a couple. They toned down several of the things in the book that I would have considered to be far too much or even downright traumatic if I had had to watch them unaltered in live action. And the film doesn't make the mistake of trying to justify Rule's bad behavior, which is a major pet peeve of mine in romantic dramas. Too many romance movies where someone's doing something heinous, it's often but not always the male lead, and the narrative doesn't condemn him for it. I hate the movie You've Got Mail. What do you mean her bookstore doesn't get saved? All that man did was lie and push his corporate franchise, throw the entire love interest away.
Death. Death to the enemies of the people of the Republic.
A reminder that you can watch Marked Men this week in cinemas on January 22nd and 23rd, and we will be back in a month during the week of the VOD release to talk about full spoilers. Marked Men will be releasing on VOD on February 28th.